You're oftentimes going to have multiple touch points before you ultimately get to the sale. And so because of that, the nurturing process takes on a different experience. It isn't that you don't embed any urgency into those messages. You do want to make people aware of the problem. But in B2B, you're educating them so that they know that the problem requires your expertise much sooner than they might otherwise think. In B2C, they oftentimes realize that there is a problem. The question is just who is going to help them solve it. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. And today we're going to continue our discussion on B2C versus B2B marketing and how we differentiate those two. So on our first episode, we talked about several different ways that B2B and B2C marketing are distinguishable. We talked about your target audience, right? That was the core. Who are you talking to? An individual versus an entity. An entity can be a series of people. It can be a decision maker, but it is going to typically be a group that you're talking to. We talked about the buyer journey and that it is a longer journey from awareness to purchase in a B2B context. We talked about sales cycle, and the sales cycle tends to be much more driven by urgency in a B2C context versus a B2B, which can usually be extended from weeks to months and oftentimes involve proposals and RFPs and multiple consultations. And we talk about the key marketing goals, right? The key marketing goals being that in the B2C world, you're trying to capture attention, you're trying to get people while they are in the heat of the moment of needing to hire a lawyer, versus in the B2B world, you're really trying to build authority, you're trying to create a mystique around you so that when those proposals come, when those opportunities come for you to make a pitch to someone, that ultimately you are successful in doing that. And then finally, we talked about messaging tone, right? Messaging tone being empathetic, very much around winning, driving, helping, achieving for your B2C customers. And in your B2B world, being very industry specific, ROI specific, and painting yourself as the professional and really making sure that those messages are really dovetailing into the idea of risk mitigation and ROI. Okay. All right. So today we're going to continue our discussion about B2C versus B2B. And the first thing we're going to talk about is marketing channels. Now, this is one of my favorite areas of marketing to talk about because a lot of times this is where I see marketing just completely go off the rails for law firms, right? A lot of times it isn't what you're saying. It isn't even who you're saying it to. It is where you are saying it, right? So when we think B2C, I want you to consider that there are some very basic things that you're going to do, right? You're almost always going to be looking at Google Ads, right? Because Google Ads allows you to put a message in front of people who are actively searching for exactly what you are selling, right? Person says, divorce lawyer near me, your ad will pop up, right? You want that synergy because again, we're very much driven by urgency. We're trying to get the sale right now. You also want to use search engine optimization, right? So people that are searching for things that relate to your business, you want them to happen upon your website by virtue of having the requisite number of keywords on your website. In various places on your website so that people can find you. Then, of course, you have social media, right? So social media marketing in a B2C context has become much more relevant and pertinent over, I would say, certainly the last 5 years, but it really has ballooned even before then. And you especially want to think about Facebook and Instagram. Now, anytime we talk about platforms, you have to remember a few things. With social media, the only platform that is indexable by search engines is LinkedIn. Okay. So don't think that you're going to put information on Facebook and people are going to Google you and find it on Facebook the same way they'd find it on your website. Okay. That's not going to happen. But people on social media are typically there for some purpose other than buying your service, right? They're not going to social media to search for your service. They're on there to connect with their friends, to see fun things, to zone out from a stressful day, and your message comes in front of them. Now, the good thing about this is that, especially with the low cost of things like retargeting, you can get a lot of bang for your buck by keeping people aware of you and keeping that top of mind awareness for when they are at the place of making a decision, because the more times they see a marketing message, the more likely they are to act upon it. But you also can use your social media platforms for purposes making a sale in the moment, right? So you can actually do Facebook ads or Instagram ads. So that's an opportunity for you as well. You also think B2C, you think of referrals, right? Person to person. Stacy has a great experience with law firm X that serves a population selling service Y. Dave, her neighbor, needs service Y, reaches out to Stacy and says, hey, do you know anybody who does this? Stacy says, yes, call my law firm, right? That oftentimes is a way that lawyers will make a very significant book of business for themselves without any additional ad spend, without spending money, without doing much more than simply being good at what they do and asking for referrals from existing sources. And then, of course, reviews and testimonials, right? You want to have social proof on your website and on the various different places where lawyers are rated and evaluated so that people will be able to say, yeah, this person, this entity, this business is legit. Now, in the B2B world, some of these things will also be valuable, right? It's positive that anytime someone Googles your name or searches for your company, that positive reviews come up. It's not that these things are not important in B2B, but other areas of marketing, other marketing channels will take on greater significance for a person who is marketing in the B2B world than in B2C. So in particular, I mentioned it earlier, LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is kind of the business platform for purposes of social media. And again, it is indexable by search engines. So if you put articles on LinkedIn, you are likely to be able to be found when someone Googles your name or a topic on, I say Googles, it really is searching any search engine, but Google, Bing, Yahoo, etc. I'm just using Google because it's the largest. But you want to have that level of reach. You want people to be able to find you through that authority that we talked about earlier in the B2B world. And LinkedIn is a great way to do that. You also see one of your great opportunities for a marketing channel with B2B is webinars, right? Webinars give people an opportunity to not just hear you, so they get that know, like, and trust factor that we talked about with video in our last episode, but it also gives people an opportunity to hear your expertise and how you explain things. Now, in the B2B world, this is really important because it's not just that you have the knowledge. It's not just that as you have the knowledge, you're willing and able to share it, but it's, are you explaining it in a way that makes sense for the person that's listening? Are you able to give concrete value that is digestible, that is usable, that is helpful to the person who is contemplating a relationship with a lawyer, or even if they're not contemplating it at that time, they resonate with you, right? It gives people an opportunity to say, if I have to learn this material, I'd rather learn it from you rather than learn it from someone else. Okay. Another big channel, great for B2B is white papers, right? White papers, again, allow people to get deeper expertise. And you might be thinking, as we're talking about all this expertise you're going to be giving away in your marketing, like, hey, if I just give it all away, like, when am I going to get a chance to make money? Well, here's the thing. When you're giving away information that is general. And of course, we all know that legal challenges are specific. So a person who reads a white paper about a given topic, they might be able to use that information and immediately go back and solve their problem or mitigate risk in a particular area. And that's great. They will associate problem solving with you and how, for very little to no cost, they were able to get their answer to a very complex problem. But more importantly, they're going to be thinking, and this is how you would effectively use a white paper, what is it that I'm getting from this that I am going to be able to use with my future problem? And oftentimes, it isn't so simple as I can read the white paper and get the answer. Many times, the white paper starts giving you cues of what to do, and embedded in the white paper are calls to action or some other form of connecting them with you personally to schedule a call, to explore their problem a little bit deeper, and create a very specific solution to their problem. All right, email nurture sequence, right? Again, we use email marketing with individuals, but email marketing with individuals, if a person doesn't need a legal problem solved in a moment, they may or may not pay attention to your newsletter. They may or may not care what its contents provide. In the B2B space, a lot of times, in-house counsel or even board members will sign up for newsletters with lawyers because what they're looking for is not, I have a legal problem today, I need to know what to do, but they want to become better educated, right? They want to, in general, become a consumer of the type of information that's going to help them to mitigate risk for their company, and that's going to help them to gain an ROI and increase market share. So when you think about that and you think about ways that you can provide that, a lot of times the thought process will be, I'm on Susie Smith's law firm's website or on their newsletter. And just by virtue of being here, I picked up 3 strategies that we were able to implement just from the newsletter that helped us to gain market share of 3.4% in this sector. And now we are having a legal problem in this area that is the focal point of Susie Smith's law firm. Let me call her because she's the one who ultimately gave me the solution. I've already gotten my value out of this person. So I already believe in this person. Now, of course, the next area is one of the most challenging and one of the areas that I will candidly tell you that a lot of our LFM clients struggle with. Okay. And this is what we refer to as strategic networking. Now, networking is necessary for all business owners. It's not something you can bypass. I have done any number of YouTube videos about networking for introverts. So if you are consuming this show on our YouTube channel, just go over. You can search YouTube for networking for introverts. Even if you just search the word introvert, several videos will come up that talk about that topic. And if you're on any other podcast platform, then head over to YouTube. You can check that out. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe the content over there. But one of the things that we talk about when we talk about introverts and networking is that you have to develop a system around it. Well, even if you don't have a system and you just throw yourself into the world of networking as a B2C marketing lawyer, you can create relationships, right? You can find that one person who you just like chatting with over a cocktail at a networking event. When we're talking about the B2B marketing space, it is really challenging to happen upon relationships unless you are a naturally effusive personality and natural networker, okay? And a lot of us aren't, okay? So, no shame to your game. If you are a natural introvert or extrovert, that's great. This is not a criticism one way or another, but it's just identifying that one of the great challenges that we will always have is finding a way to network when you're in the B2B space that gets you to the right people in the right way. Okay, so that means oftentimes joining trade association groups that have your people. That means knowing who is likely to be attending the event. So you have names, trying to get names in advance. Sometimes it's about calling event organizers to see who is going to be in the room and connecting with the event organizer so that that person or people can point out to you who are the strategic people at different companies where you want to get a foot in the door. And again, these are longer term relationships that are built over time. So it is not typical that you're going to go to a networking event, hit it off with somebody, make a proposal the next week, and get some business. Happens. We've absolutely seen that happen. But much more often, it is that you're going to create an avenue where you're going to get a foot in the door with 1 or 2 people, and then you're going to start cultivating your way up the food chain to decision makers if that person is not a decision maker in that business. And that takes time and it takes a very strategic approach, right? It would be very much a waste of your time if you just started picking up your business cards and heading on out to pound the networking streets if you don't have an approach of who you need to get in front of in order to get to a decision maker, in order to either make a pitch or start a strategic relationship with someone in that business, okay? So a lot of different channels there for B2C versus B2B when we talk about marketing. All right, next up, let's talk about content strategy. This is another pretty weighty topic. Now, when we talk about content, we of course know that in order for people to find you and know that you are an authority and able to help them with their legal challenge, you need to be putting out content. And that is an overwhelming ask for a lot of law firm owners, especially solos and law firms that have 5 or fewer lawyers, right? If you're in a space where you're doing a lot of, if not all of the lawyering, and you're doing a lot of, if not all of the managing and leading in a law firm, you just don't have the time, right? Now, there's some very specific ways that we help people to actually extract things from their plate, because there are a lot of things that you can get off your plate that don't have to be done and or can be done by someone else in ways that are much more cost effective and will fuel profit for you than you realize. And this, by the way, is one of the things we're going to be talking about at our systems retreat, our virtual retreat that's coming up in the month of June. So if you haven't already checked that out, we are going to have some information about that available. Just check the show notes for a link to go over to our landing page so you can read all about our systems retreat and join us for that in this month of June. However, before we get there, I want everyone to just have in their mind that they need to develop a content strategy. And it really doesn't have to be as overwhelming a process as a lot of people may think. So the first thing is, again, I want you to think about who your target audience is. If you're in the B2C world, your content is largely going to be focused on urgency, right? You want to answer urgent personal questions, right? What happens if this? When can I do that? And you want to give full enough answers that people could say, I had a question in my mind about how I can navigate this particular challenge. And in a 30-second to 90-second video, I got an answer from an expert. Okay. And an expert who presents all of the things that will increase that know, like, and trust factor, right? This person speaks clearly, explains things in a way that I can understand, has a warm tone of voice. And then, of course, we can talk about all the things like staging your background and all that, right? But you're really talking about punchy, quick, answering urgent questions. In the B2B world, however, you want to give deeper analysis. You want to go into insightful, high-value educational content for decision makers. So you want to open up your content with, if you are a leader of a C-suite, or if you are an executive director of this type of company, or if you are on the board of this type of nonprofit, right? This message is for you. And then you want to tailor whatever the content is to that specific person. Now, you might say, hey, if I write this for the C-suite executive, aren't I going to be missing an opportunity to speak to maybe the VP in a particular area that might have decision-making authority? Maybe in this company, they've given a VP decision-making authority over a series of things that could touch legal. And, I've just now ousted them from consideration. And the answer is really no. And we talk about this a lot when we talk about marketing. Your messaging should always overshoot your audience, meaning it is always fine to talk to something that is above the head of the people that you want to serve or people that you're willing to serve. You don't want to talk below the level of the people you want to serve, because everybody wants to think that they are the $1 million entrepreneur, even if they have $100,000, right? The $100,000 entrepreneur is going to be inspired by messages that appeal to the $1 million entrepreneur. But the $10 million entrepreneur is not going to be inspired by messages that are spoken to the $1 million entrepreneur. So you always want to overshoot. And if you're speaking to a C-suite executive and the decision maker who would ultimately hire you is not in the C-suite, that's probably going to be okay, right? It really is the content, the specificity, the level of knowledge and expertise that's required that is going to help give it value for whomever is going to be consuming it, that will have them say, yeah, this lawyer is an expert that I can rely upon. Okay, next up, let's talk a little bit about lead nurture, okay? Now, when we talk about nurturing leads, this is something that all marketers will help you to cultivate. So if you are at the place where you are hiring a marketing company and a marketing agency, they are typically going to be talking about multiple forms of messaging going out. You're not just going to build a website, right? You're not just going to drive people to your website. You're going to drive people to your website. You're going to have some gated content for them when they get there. So they're going to have to give you their email in order to get access to maybe a white paper that's on your website. And then their email is going to be added to an email marketing list where you're going to be sending out messages to them regularly. And that gated content is going to have opportunities for them to consume other content on different platforms, like perhaps have an email, perhaps have a drip campaign of videos that are going to be housed on YouTube, right? So you're going to be using various different marketing channels by virtue of trying to get people nurtured into becoming your client, okay? And all that really means is enough messages that are tailored to them in enough different places, spoken to them in different cadences, right? Some things long form, some things short form, that are going to get them to make a decision, okay? Now, with B2C, this is much more immediate, right? You're hearing a theme here, right? Whenever we talk about B2C, we talk about urgency. We talk about making a decision now. We talk about fighting for you in a way that's going to get them to the win, right? Because people are usually in a state of hurt and need to solve the problem now, or at least in relatively short order, with B2C, in a way that they don't have with B2B. Okay. So you want to talk about typically a call to action, right? There's message and there's call to action. See the information, call us now, right? See the information, let us know. See the information, click here for a consultation. Versus lead nurture in B2B circumstances takes on a little bit different experience, right? It's multi-touch, it's consultative. And again, because you typically in the buyer journey are going to have a series of RFPs, of consultations, proposals will be negotiated. You're oftentimes going to have multiple touch points before you ultimately get to the sale, okay? And so because of that, the nurturing process takes on a different experience. It isn't that you don't embed any urgency into those messages. You do want to make people aware of the problem. But in B2B, you're educating them so that they know that the problem requires your expertise much sooner than they might otherwise think. In B2C, they oftentimes realize that there is a problem. The question is just who is going to help them solve it. Next area we're going to talk about with marketing differentiation between B2B and B2C is our conversion metrics. Okay, so when we talk about conversion is taking a person from a lead into a client. Okay, so pretty simple idea there, but it revolves around some pretty complex metrics. And I'm not going to go into all of the metrics today. We're going to do a separate episode just about marketing metrics. But one of the things that you have to think about with B2C is that typically you are going to have a lot more opportunities, which means you are going to have a higher touch point of impressions, right? So that means an impression is a marketing message that is out and available to be consumed by a potential prospect. Okay. So when you think about that, you're going to have a lot of volume-based KPIs. You could have 10,000 impressions to get to 100 leads. And that from your 100 leads, right, you could have 70 of them be qualified. And then you're going to have 30 of them get scheduled for consultations. And then you're going to have 15 of them actually show up for your consultations, and maybe only 10 of them become clients, right? So you started with 10,000 people and got it all the way down to 10 people to make sales, okay? Very different. It's a very different mentality in the B2B world, right? You're thinking about clicks here. When you're thinking about conversion metrics, you're going to be measuring things like your cost per client acquisition. You need to know that cost in both areas, but cost per click takes on a greater significance in the B2C world because you're doing things digitally like SEO, like pay-per-click ads, social media ads, and so forth. With B2B, your conversion metrics are, again, relationship-based. So you're really looking at how many touch points you are going to have with each person who is either a direct decision maker or is an indirect decision maker who can get you to a direct decision maker. So when you think about that, that isn't thousands of clicks, right, that you want to use to get to 100 leads. Typically, you are chasing a particular lead that is a particular company, and you want to get your foot in the door with a particular person. But that person has to be nurtured, right, through the lead nurturing process we talked about earlier. But that person has to be nurtured into a relationship. And then you want to start measuring things like how many touch points over what period of time it took to get to that first set consultation. And then you want to be measuring what is the time period from that first set conversation, right? That consultation that is the initiation of the sales process to when the person becomes, or the company actually becomes a client, right? those numbers take on greater significance because when you are trying to reverse engineer a funnel to grow your B2B company, you're going to be thinking about how much you have to do as the owner or whomever is networking on the part of your company, right? Whoever are the people going out to get business, your rainmakers. How much activity has to happen monthly if it takes on average a certain amount of months to be able to get into the door with a decision maker, to be able to then nurture that decision maker over some more period of months before you ultimately get to setting an appointment, scheduling a consultation, sending out a proposal in response to an RFP, negotiating, and then ultimately securing a client, right? Very, very different than the B2C world. So we have talked through on these past 2 episodes the differentiators between B2C and B2B marketing. Now, I want you all to take this. Now, you might be saying, if I'm a business lawyer, I already know this, right? I already know that in the B2B world, this is how I'm supposed to organize my marketing. And I already know in the B2C world, this is how I'm supposed to organize my marketing. But I thought it was important that we actually differentiated the two and did a side-by-side comparison for you, because one of the challenges that is really prevalent now is that lawyers that want to grow oftentimes want to bring in lawyers that will have diverse interests. And even though specialization still is the way that we will make our bread and butter, right? Lawyers are not a jack of all trades anymore. You don't go to your local lawyer to do all things lawyering. You still want to have the opportunity to take advantage of people who might have different skill sets. And oftentimes that means bringing in somebody who might have to be measured by different protocols, right? They might have to have different requirements for the role. They might have to have a different compensation strata because they might be compensated for activity before it actually nets to a client. And if they are, you want to make sure that the activity that they're engaged in is going to lead to a client, right? So you have to measure it and track it. And you also want to be thinking about how that correlates with their productivity requirements, right? How much work they're going to have on their plate to be able to produce the work that makes the money for the firm while they are growing their individual book of business and revenue for the firm. All right, everyone, you have been listening to the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I will see you on our next episode.